Okay, record should have started. Buongiorno a tutte e tutti, benvenuti. Se ho parlato in inglese nei primi attimi è perché il quarto ed ultimo webinar della serie di webinar La dimensione sociale della povertà energetica ci riporta ad un confronto in lingua inglese. Quindi da questo momento introdurrò appunto la nostra ospite di oggi, Lidija Živčič, però in tutto questo passerò alla lingua inglese, quindi buono sforzo a tutti gli studenti che faranno questo, diciamo, secondo esercizio di comprensione e grazie ovviamente a tutti, e lo dico in italiano, ma grazie anche ovviamente alla nostra ospite di oggi. Good afternoon, everybody. We are basically at the end of our journey with this our journey into energy poverty, into the social dimension of energy poverty, with these 4 webinars that accompanied us into the features, the several dimensions, the different geographies, especially with reference to Eastern Europe, of energy poverty. We we started with the behavioral approach on energy poverty with a contribution from JRC. We then moved to Hungary with Anna Sofia Bayomi, with her focus, her studies on the solid fuel users in rural areas of Hungary. And a week ago, we figured out how RSA, Ricerca Sistema Energetico, therefore the research entity with a public mandate from the Minister of Ecologic Transition, Italian Minister of Ecologic Transition, is researching, investigating, and developing empirical activities on energy poverty. Today, I'm glad to have with us to present to you Lidija Živčič from Slovenian scholars from Focus, Association for Sustainable Development. I will copy and paste the website to you soon. Focus is an NGO, a Slovenian NGO based in Ljubljana, capital city of Slovenia, deals with many different aspects related to energy transition and green transition overall, but also with other aspects, even with dealing with other spheres beyond that of energy. So an NGO that copes with many social implications and social aspects in Slovenia. Today, Lidija Živčič will talk about energy poverty, of course, by providing a zoom into the southeastern and Mediterranean Europe with a lecture with the title Energy Poverty, a multidimensional challenge with varying regional specificities, but common underlying factors. So a title that is already quite meaningful in introducing the themes, the topics that our last guest of these fourfold journeys will share with us. As you can notice, of course, from the flyer that I'm sharing with you. I wouldn't say much more about the webinar, about of course the presentation and about the webinars. Just let me anticipatedly thank everybody. So of course, starting from Lidija that is today with us, but also I'm very grateful to the other guests that joined us that shared with us all their knowledges and studies. I just anticipate I learned a lot about this. It has been undoubtedly interesting to study and to, let's say, familiarize with these different perspectives. And I'm pretty sure that the same will be for today's webinar. And also I'm thankful to all of you guys, students, and all the decision makers also and scholars that joined us over these 4 weeks and even today. Not more grateful for the moment. I'm pretty sure I will repeat all these things at the very end, but now I would stop sharing my screen. Oh, my screen was not shared, I figured out at the moment, so pretty sorry about this. I think now I think is even quite unnecessary. So okay, all of you know the flyers actually, so quite sorry for this mistake, but okay. I would leave the floor to Lidija Živčič, to our guest, for her presentation. Floor is yours. You are free to share your own screen from this moment. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Lorenzo. It's a great pleasure for me to be with you today. It's amazing to see so many people at a relatively late hour and apparently good weather in Trieste. So I'm really happy that we're going to spend the next short couple of hours together. Yeah, as Lorenzo already said, I'm coming from Slovenia, from a small NGO called Focus Association for Sustainable Development. We're mainly dealing with climate-related issues, so energy, transport, and for the last, I would say, over a decade, we're focusing on energy poverty. We worked on energy poverty in different regions, and today I would like to give you a closer glimpse or closer insight to the faces of energy poverty in these different regions. So first we will look at the different phases of energy poverty in Southeast Europe, then maybe a bit more focus on the Mediterranean. We'll have a look into the three different regions in Slovenia to see how they differ even in a small place like Slovenia. And then finally, we will explore the structural factors that are bringing us to energy poverty and talk a little bit about a project called Empowerment, which is a Horizon 2020 project, and actually for which we're having the project meeting right now in Zadar in Croatia. And yeah, right now my partners are happily wandering the sunny streets of Zadar, and I hope that they're having a good time. But maybe before we really dive...
Sorry, Lidija, sorry for interrupting you. The screen was not shared, so no
Yes,
problem
yes.
for this intro. No, okay,
Yes.
fair enough.
I
And by the
decided...
way, let me also say to the audience that if Lidija is not showing herself, it's because we checked out before that there are unluckily some problems with the camera. So this is just out of information for all of us. So that is no problem, of course, about this. And sorry again for interrupting you. So feel free to share your slide and your presentation whenever you want. And
Yes,
okay.
we'll start in a moment. And yes, thank you very much for pointing out about the camera. I apologize. Normally I have an extra camera because my computer's camera is a little bit moody. Sometimes it works and sometimes not. But today I don't have the extra camera. But anyhow, the reason I didn't share the screen yet is because actually I wanted to first share a link. Now in the chat, you have a link to a quiz. It's a very short quiz about energy poverty. And since, yeah, today it's the final step of your journey, let's see how much you already know about energy poverty. Please feel welcome to test your
Fair enough.
knowledge a little bit.
Fair enough. Thanks a lot. I will do as well. So please,
Okay.
guys, do that in the meantime.
I'll wait for your results. Perhaps when you're
Okay.
finished, just write in the chat what is your overall score, just to have an idea
Perfect.
how knowledgeable we are about energy poverty.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Perfect. It's done. So I will be the first to share my score.
Yeah, of course, this is not like a test or anything. I just wanted to get a
Sure.
general impression of, yeah, how much understanding of energy poverty there already is, just so to know how deep to go into the explanations and how much to skip. So, yeah.
Looking at the chat, it seems we are having already we are going to have a second response. Thanks, Lydia, for sharing with us this quiz. Quite interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah.
It even already enable us to familiarize about these multidimensional aspects of energy poverty. What's that? These multidimensional challenges related to energy poverty. So Daniele Zoletto is 4 out of 6.
Yeah.
Not bad, I would say.
I see that I'm not gonna have to start with the very basics. So that's gonna be nice, because sometimes I talk so much about energy poverty that when I have to do it again from the very scratch, it starts to be a little bit boring, although it's a very, very complex topic and a very, very complex problem, as we will learn today. So yeah, maybe as the results are coming in, I will anyway have just a very quick view on what is energy poverty, or how we defined energy poverty in our project. We said, or we defined that household affected by energy poverty cannot achieve the minimum level of domestic energy consumption, which is required for, on one hand, satisfying the basic needs, but also on the other hand, for an effective participation in society. Namely, it's not enough just that you don't feel cold or too hot in your home. It's also necessary that you can have sufficient energy service, that you can take a good part in society. For example, that you don't have such strong mold in your home that your clothes would smell too much, that you would be embarrassed to go into society, or that you would not be ashamed to invite your kids' friends in your home to play together, and this kind of stuff. So it's not just the physical necessity, but also the social necessity that has to be covered. Maybe I wanted to show this as one of the basic pictures of Europe in terms of how it's divided in the line of energy poverty. We can see quite clearly that the eastern and southern parts of Europe tend to be more affected by energy poverty. And yeah, today it's exactly those regions that we will be looking at. So this will help us understand why these countries are more affected. I will start with the Southeast Europe first. It's a very specific region because energy poverty occurs quite a lot. And for example, if we would use the old definition from the
Sorry, Lydia, for interrupting you again. We are keeping the screen is keeping at the slide number 4 about the definition of energy poverty. So I suppose you showed the map about the dualism between southern Eastern Europe and so on. Yeah, exactly.
Now it moves.
Maybe
Okay.
now it is moving. Yeah, and we also see all the is not problematic. There are no problem to us. All the, let's say, PowerPoint structure with the instruments bar. So there is no problem, of course, in the sharing, but if you maybe start with full screen, we attempt to share with the full screen, maybe the view is better. If not, we can keep as it is. It's no problem.
Yeah, I do have it on full screen on my computer. It shows totally full screen. So I don't know. Let me see again.
Let's click that. Okay, no, okay. If not, it's because there is a reverse, let's say reverse uses of the screen. But there's no problem. We see the slide with that, so
Okay.
So no problem at all. We can keep it is. If the slides don't continue to proceed, I will keep informed with you. But
Okay.
so before was going, like before you tried, it was working. So
Yeah.
if not, I
So
will
now
update.
is it moving?
Now it's moving. Yeah,
Okay.
you reached the slide number 6. So perfect,
Okay.
perfect. Thank
That
you.
means that basically I have to stay in the view with the bars and everything. Then it actually moves.
Exactly,
So yeah.
exactly. No
I'm
problem
sorry
about it.
about that, but sometimes technologies have some puzzling
There's no problem at all.
functioning.
Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, back to Southeast European situation. As I said, energy poverty occurs a lot in the countries of Southeast Europe, and there are some characteristics. Like, for example, if we would take the old definition from the UK, which said that if you give more than 10% of your income for covering your basic energy needs, you're affected by energy poverty. So if we would take this definition and we would apply it to actually a big part of the Southeast Europe countries, almost all the population would result to be energy poor. This is how bad the situation actually is. And this is why it's a region that is very specific and needs to be discussed in a separate way almost. It's characteristical that energy poverty has a very low or actually even no political interest in the region. Most of the decision makers are saying, well, we don't care about that. And actually, also another characteristic is that even when people are not per se poor, they still cannot afford some of the basic energy services. So even if they have a relatively comfortable income, they cannot afford to pay for decent heating. They cannot heat the whole house, or they cannot cool the whole house. So it's very specific for the Southeast Europe. Housing stock is in a very poor state. As you will soon see in some pictures that I have, sometimes the living conditions are really shockingly poor. There's very limited social or other support for people affected by energy poverty. A few countries have these programs where you can get free coal for heating if you are affected by energy poverty. But this is actually almost even worse, because then you're using this very polluting source of heating, which is also causing health problems and so on. So the programs that are there are very scarce, and even when they are not suitable for addressing energy poverty. Two very strong characteristics that are dividing this part of Europe from the rest of the Europe is that there are no clear divisions between social and non-social housing. We have, let's say, a multi-apartment block where you would have both rich and poor people. It's not like in some parts of Western Europe, like, so, for example, in France, it's quite known that there are neighborhoods where it's mostly social housing. In countries of Southeast Europe, this is very mixed, and you cannot say, okay, this neighborhood is social housing and this one is not. Another similar dividing line is that in this part of Europe, we tend to be owners of our housing. We don't tend to rent, we tend to own it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're better off or that we can actually do something about it. Sometimes we have really poor conditions, but we are the owners, yet we cannot do anything because we do not have money to actually make any investments. Also, the last characteristic of the region is that actually some 30 years ago now, we switched from the subsidized energy prices to market-based prices, energy prices, and this is causing still quite a shock, because in some countries this happened very abrupt, and people don't manage to cover the high energy costs, and this is also one of the reasons for high levels of energy poverty. I wanted to just show a few photos. Mainly they're from Croatia, actually. They're from one of our previous projects where we were looking at the county of Sisak and Moslavina. And we actually encountered some really strange situations. Like, for example, here you can see that the windows are just kind of plastered with tape for the holes to be plugged. Here you can see, for example, a very interesting way of insulating your house. Basically, you just use the old bricks and some plastic, some crunched plastic to create some sort of insulation on the wall. Then the next one is a rather typical case of leaking roof. Quite a lot of houses had totally damp ceilings and mold forming in a lot of parts of the housing. This is, for example, a very, how to say, creative way to link your electricity, your indoor electricity, just by not even trying to cover the holes. This we encountered as a cooking place for one single person household. This is also a creative way of trying to heat your place through the cooking place. Actually, this is already sort of like combination with some modern approaches. So this is maybe not even so bad, but it's kind of creative. And yeah, this actually for me kind of represents the symbol of energy poverty. You do have the light somehow, but it's the bare minimum. The light bulb is just kind of hanging on the wall. So yeah, it's actually even in a way a rich household, because we did encounter households that didn't even have electricity indoor. They just simply had no access to electricity. And there was about even 30% of houses that didn't have indoor plumbing, which means that they had toilet and water only outside of the house. One would not think that this is European Union at this age, but it actually is, and it's shocking to see this kind of stuff. Now, let's see if the video actually works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Nope, the video doesn't want to work. Just give me a second, maybe I'll try with
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Let's try like this, maybe. Can you see this?
It's not that easy.
No, we hear and we don't see, so you should maybe reduce onto icon the presentation just for the moment that the video is going. We only hear basically at the moment.
Yeah, just a second. I'll try to do the screen sharing again, and hopefully this time it works a bit better. I have to admit that I'm more used to Zoom these days, and that's why Teams is causing me a little bit of a problem. But let's see, maybe like this, it should work.
That's a change of perspective. It's working. It's working. Yeah, full screen. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
Energetsko siromaštvo znači da pojedine obitelji, odnosno kućanstva, imaju probleme u podmirivanju troškova za energiju i energente, odnosno da u nekim slučajevima nisu u stanju održati svoje kućanstvo adekvatno toplim. Kuća je ustavljena 2001. godine, ima 96 kvadrata. Fasadu još nismo, kako da kažem, nemam sredstava. Gubim na stolarije, gubim jako puno, pogotovo što su ti prozori dosta stari i ta izo, to je kao izo staklo, ali to je popustilo, ušlo mi je zrak unutra. Po zimi potrošimo od 20 do 25 metara drva, ovisi o tome kakva je jaka zima. Peć na koju se grijemo, imamo 96 kvadrata, ne vrata, zato da toplina ide po cijeloj kući. Uz sve ovo što mi radi na struju, i računam drva i plin, tako i kuham, odlazi oko nekih 25% prihoda. Oni troše značajne količine svojih sredstava na podmirivanje troškova za energiju i iz tog razloga nisu u stanju ništa uštediti ili uložiti u obnovu tog kućanstva da bi bolje živjeli i da bi imali manje troškove za energiju.
Okay, so yeah, this I think is quite strong visual representation of how energy poverty looks in southern and eastern Europe. And actually, this house is one of the better ones that we've seen.
Okay.
So yeah, you can just get a bit of idea how things look like. Moving on to the energy poverty in the Mediterranean. There's also, again, like a maybe not completely new face of energy poverty, but it's a little bit different face of energy poverty. The main characteristic is that it's a big challenge to keep homes comfortably cool during the summer. Most of the people are suffering a lot because they get very high temperatures in their homes. They almost cannot use their homes. So this is a very strong specific of the region. Similarly to South and Eastern Europe, it's very poor buildings. It's lack of insulation in buildings. And what is quite characteristic is also that there's a lack of warming or cooling systems in the buildings. As a result, many people actually use electricity for both heating and cooling. Very often we see the air conditioning taking over both the cooling and the heating function, or people are using electric heaters, which actually are quite expensive because electricity is quite an expensive source for heating, which of course leads to higher costs, leads to more inability to actually cover these costs. There are very high rates of errors. Also, a lot of people are indebted to energy companies. Many disconnections happen in the region. And actually also one thing that happens very often is evictions, because people simply cannot offer to afford their living place anymore. The evictions are partially a result of this, I would call it a clash between touristic demand for housing and the locals' demands for housing. Namely, the touristic demand for housing is pushing the prices up. And this is why the locals can hardly afford to have a living space, to have a decent dwelling. And situations such as evictions are very often. Also illegal, how you call it, illegal occupation of flats happens because people are simply pushed to the street, and when they're in the street they risk and they sometimes occupy empty flats which would be owned by banks, for example, and so on. Another characteristic of the region is that these touristic hotspots basically bring to a lot of precarious jobs that also are low quality jobs, not maybe very good quality jobs, like in the tourism sector, in the harbor sector, in the transit sector, and so on. It's a very strong characteristic of the Mediterranean coastal areas that people would have employment for up to 3 months a year. And then for the other 9 months, they would have nothing to do because they're dependent on the tourists and their presence in the region. This is actually also one of the reasons for energy poverty, because for some time you can cover your bills, but for the rest of the year, you're almost in fear of being disconnected. Okay, so let's move on to Slovenia. Maybe just first to show the map a little bit, I will be talking about 3 regions, starting from the east. I don't know, do you see my cursor now moving on the Pomorje? Okay, anyhow, the Pomorje region is Pomorska, is the region closest to Hungary, so the total northeast of the country. Then we will move to Zasavska region, which is like in the heart of the country. And last, we will look at the Obalno-Kraška region, which is actually the region closest to Trieste, is the seaside and the background of the seaside of Slovenia, the background basically of Trieste. As you will see, these 3 regions have quite different faces. In the Pomorska region, Pomorje, it's a primarily rural area with a lot of really huge multi-family houses, which were constructed in the 70s and 80s, the idea was that, you know, you would construct the house for yourself and for your children, so that your children would actually raise their families also in your house. But what happened inevitably, of course, is that because it's rural regions, children escaped to the cities, got jobs and their lives in the cities, and it's mostly elderly people left with these really huge houses, with just one of them or a couple, elderly couple, and they are unable to heat the whole place. They are unable to pay for heating the whole place. And this is why they're suffering huge energy poverty. Also, these houses are totally inefficient because they were built in the era of 70s and 80s. So any sort of insulation is not really known in the region. It's very common that the region is heating with wood, and this is also causing problems with sometimes the indoor pollution, because they're using these heat stoves a bit similar to the one you saw in the video. And if the heat stove is a bit old, it's causing a lot of indoor pollution, which is related also to health hazards of these elderly people. Moving on to the Zasavia region. This is actually a former mining region. There used to be big coal mines in the region, but because of running out of coal and also partially phasing out of coal, they had to close down the mines. It will cost a lot of unemployment, of course, in the region. And slowly now efforts are done to restructure the region, to give it different professions, give it different industries, so that people could work in different places. What is characteristic for the region is that we have the so-called mining colonies. It's these multi-flat buildings. They're relatively small blocks of apartments. They were built at the turn of the previous century, so around 1900. And they were done according to those standards at the time. Plus, they were done for miners, so relatively poor people with no high demands for a living standard and so on. And actually, these buildings are still in use today, although they have really small rooms. They have sometimes no windows, or the windows are really, really small. They don't have balconies, and in worst cases, they don't even have installed bathrooms yet. Some of them are, so to say, modernized, and they have installed indoor bathrooms, but we found even places where they would have one joint bathroom for the floor, or even there was one occasion where the toilet was still outside of the building. These kind of buildings are totally inadequate for today's standards. They're very inefficient, and actually it's very, very difficult to renovate them in a meaningful manner. So it's actually, unfortunately, better to just destroy. Living in these buildings is very difficult because also people that were in the mining sector, they lost their jobs. So now they're having really big trouble with paying for their bills, paying for the heating. We even saw cases of families that were simply cutting off the district heating radiators because they simply could not afford the heating, so they had to cut the pipes that they would not be using the district heating. And then finally moving to the Primorska region, which is the one closest to Trieste. Similarly as in the neighboring towns of Trieste, we have these old city centers, which are very compact, with very narrow streets and squeezed old buildings. The region is characterized by social flats being in the old centers. And also those flats are a bit like in the previous region, not very adequate, because these buildings, they were built for maybe 2 or 3 flats per building. But because they made social flats from them, they squeezed 5 or 6 or sometimes even more apartments into the same building, which means that it's very small apartments. Sometimes you would have a bathroom in the ground floor, and then your flat would be on the second floor, and so on. So it's not very adequate living conditions. It's also very inefficient buildings. Although they all have these really thick stone walls, this does not help a lot with the insulation. It does help a little bit, but not a lot. And especially in summer, it's very problematic because when the stone heats up, it's like in an oven. And also these old centers are characterized by no greenery around. So there is no plants, no shadows that could give you some breathing space. And it's actually also difficult for people because when their apartment is too hot, they cannot escape to a park or to some greenery because there are simply just not enough parks and green areas. Again, we have mainly electricity use, which is expensive. And also in this region, it's so to call it a bit of an ethnical problem because it's a lot of people from former Yugoslavia, also coming from different cultural backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, and sometimes for this reason unable to navigate the Slovenian, for example, social system, the health system. So sometimes they tend to be not well integrated in the services that they could actually access. Perhaps maybe that I don't talk all the time, maybe we can make a small break. Are there any questions or discussions that you would like to have at this moment?
Sorry?
Yeah, I'm just asking
I didn't hear, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking if anyone happens to have some questions or wants to have some discussion at this point.
I think we can collect for the end. To my knowledge, it's quite clear, and if somebody amongst the students have, but I think we could collect for the end of the presentation, and all the students, of course, as usual, feel free even to write in the chat their question.
Okay. Yeah, because I also don't see the chat while I'm presenting. I wanted to just check that someone is not there with an urgent question. Okay, it's perfectly fine to leave the questions and the discussion for the end. So let's now move on to a quick presentation about empowerment project. Here you can see the area that is covered by the project. So we're working in Spain, in Barcelona, in France, in Marseille. In Italy, we work in Padova. In Slovenia, we work in the last region that I presented, so the Primorska region. And in Croatia, we work in Zadar, and in Albania, we work in Flora. These are the pilot regions or the pilot areas of the project. As you can see, we kind of cover the Mediterranean basin on the European side, more or less. We also have a partner from Germany, but it's a cross-cutting partner. It's WECF, and they're actually helping us with the gender aspects. The overall objective of the project is to actually contribute to energy poverty alleviation, and also to improving health of people that are affected by energy poverty. And it's focused on the coastal areas of the Mediterranean countries with a particular focus on women. We are doing quite a lot of practical activities, but we're also doing some advocacy work. And maybe perhaps before I move on to the presentation of activities, maybe I can show a small visualization of empowerment.
Sure.
Let's see if this again hopefully works. Just a second.
Sure, no problem. We see. Perfect.
Great. So yeah, this was a short visualization. In short, basically, we're looking at three cross-cutting topics, which are the summertime energy poverty or the Mediterranean aspect. We're looking at the gender issues, and we're looking at the health issues. What we do in terms of activities is 5 practical aspects or 5 practical manners to tackle energy poverty. We do household visits, which means that we do a very simple energy audit in the household. We measure how much energy is used, how the people are using water. We check their bills just to see whether their use is normal, average, or too high or too low. And then based on this audit or this check, we give advice to people what they can do in their homes and how they can, well, either save energy. In some cases, it's possible to save energy and water and reduce the bills. And when this is not possible, we at least try to make sure that they can have a better comfort of living by sometimes increasing the energy use by giving a bit of better insulation. Namely, we also, when we visit the household, we bring a package of free devices for saving energy and water, which are, for example, saving light bulbs, aerators for the taps so that you can save some water. We also do a bit of window insulation, that how we call it, insulation tapes for window insulation and door insulation. Standby plugs. So we give a package of some devices, and actually on average the savings can be up to 80 euros per year if you're using this small package of devices. It doesn't save a lot to people, but when you don't have a lot of money, even this 80 euros is quite enough. It's also not changing the lives of people, but most of them report that they're very happy and that they really like to have at least someone to talk to about energy issues because they don't know much about it. Then the next thing we do is collective assemblies. It's a different format. It's a format where people gather together every 2 weeks. We have normally a venue, a room where they gather. And the idea is that actually people help each other overcome the problems of energy poverty. That, for example, if one of the persons attending managed to change energy supplier to get a cheaper energy supplier, then this person shares with other people how to change the energy supplier. If one person knows how to insulate a window, then this person helps and shows to the other people how to make this simple window insulation. So it's like peer-to-peer empowerment across a network of people. It's a very interesting format, but practice actually showed that in some parts of Europe it works better than in others. Like, for example, actually in Italy, Croatia, and Slovenia, we discovered that people are a little bit distrustful towards this concept because they don't like to be talking about their personal problems and challenges in front of other people. For example, in Spain and France, this concept worked really great because we assessed that it's because actually people are so pressured by the energy companies that they don't have any more way to get out of their trouble than to talk openly about their problems. And it's also related to the energy sector being fully liberalized and working in, I would call it like a very harsh capitalistic conditions and really squeezing people. And this is why maybe people need to actually find support in each other and network with each other. The third thing that we do is do-it-yourself workshops. We're having small, simple workshops for simple steps of how to save energy, how to save water, how to protect yourself from the heat, and so on. We also, in Spain and Italy and France, we do-it-yourself workshops in reading the smart meters, because in these three countries, the smart meters are already quite widespread. So we were making people literate about how the smart meter works and how they can understand it and read it and how it can help them understand their energy use. Then we have health workshops. We do them in two different formats. One format is where we work directly with people affected by energy poverty. There we do sometimes, I would actually call it like a group psychotherapy. Again, it's a group of people coming together and actually working with a therapist to overcome their mental problems related to energy poverty. As I will speak in a moment, energy poverty actually brings a lot of mental stress because you're stressed because you don't know from which money you will pay the bills next day. And these workshops are helping people to relieve this stress, to talk to each other, to talk to a therapist, and to feel better. The other aspect of health workshops, or the other format, is when we work directly to the frontline staff, to the health nurses that are visiting people in homes, and we're raising awareness of these nurses on how to recognize energy poverty, what it means, and how they can actually provide some first aid to people. This is the practical stuff, and what we do after the practical stuff, and this is where we are, this is the phase of the project we're starting now. It's advocacy work. We will try to advocate for structural policies to tackle energy poverty, so for measures that will stay after the project and will help us address energy poverty. Maybe quickly about the three axes of the projects, the energy poverty and gender. There are different reasons why women tend to be more affected by energy poverty than men, namely experience in the field, and also more and more studies reveal that women are more affected than men, and this is mainly due to at least four different dimensions. One is the physiological dimension. It's because women tend to perceive temperatures in a different way than men. Women tend to be more easily cold or hot than men, and for example, this can make a lot of difference of how you perceive your thermal comfort and whether you suffer energy poverty or not. Then it's the economic dimension. Women tend to be economically disadvantaged because there's a gender pay gap. Women earn less money than men, generally speaking. Also, when it comes to pensions, there's a pension gap. Women tend to have lesser or lower pensions than men. There's the health dimension. Living in inadequately cooled or heated homes has more adverse impacts for women. Also, studies show that women are more subject or more vulnerable to winter mortality and also to mental stress, for example, because they have to take care of their children and they have a lot of stress because they cannot provide them sufficiently warm place to live, and so on. But in this aspect, the research is really scarce and more research is needed to be able to have better insights why health aspects are stronger for women than for men. Then is the social or cultural dimension. For example, the gender roles give more care work to women. this is unpaid work, so they cannot pursue a career for this reason, or cannot pursue advancement in career. And also the care work means that they're more often at home, and if this home is not warm or cold enough, then they suffer more in relation with the physiological factor. However, we don't want to portray women as this just victims and vulnerable to energy poverty. They are actually a very strong actor, and actually in practice they tend to be way more agile actors to tackle energy poverty than men. We had experience in the field that women started to do measures against energy poverty much faster than men. And one thing that we also noticed is that women do care about these small improvements in comfort, such as insulating windows or putting tap aerator to save some water and so on. Whereas men tend to like these big measures, like, you know, changing windows or changing the heating system. And this is why it's easier to engage women, and they start to act faster and move things further. Also, because women are a strong actor, we involve them in empowerment. We are doing communication targeted to women. We're doing activities in a way that women can take part in the activities. We're also trying to be using gender disaggregated indicators. We're collecting gender disaggregated data. And we're also making sure that gender equality principles are respected when we're discussing policy recommendation and providing policy advice. This is just one small infographic to show the situation in Albania, for example. We can see in terms of who is taking decisions about energy, it's more often men. It's 61% men and only 34% women. Also, men are more in charge of the contracts, the signing of the contracts and paying of the bills. So it is a very gendered role that we play in energy sector. Maybe I will skip the challenges, maybe just a few words. That actually the problem is that some of these inequalities are being reiterated by new measures. Like, for example, now we have this beautiful Green New Deal in Europe. We're having packages such as Fit for 55 or Repower Europe. So we're adopting new legislation to fight climate change and to improve energy efficiency and buildings and so on and so on. But we're actually forgetting about women, and we're leaving them in the same inadequate roles they were playing so far. For example, we're scared that with the renovation, actually women will be more affected because they are more often the renters, and after a renovation happens, the rent is raised and women are evicted from the renting place and cannot have access to a suitable dwelling. Also, in terms of jobs, the currently proposed packages are promising mostly jobs for men in the construction sector, in the efficiency sector, in the renewable sector, whereas women will be disadvantaged because these are traditionally not sectors where a lot of women's professions and women jobs can be created. So it is very important that we actually try to address these challenges and talk about more of the role of women and how they can play a more meaningful role also in the energy transition, in the climate fight, and so on. And maybe quickly about the third axis, the health. Energy poverty is affecting both physical as well as mental health, but also social health. In terms of physical health, it's already, scientifically proven. There are studies showing that there's increasing cardiovascular diseases. There's also increases in respiratory diseases and also increase in winter infections such as colds and flus because of energy poverty. Energy poverty can actually also lead to increased indoor poisoning because of burning inadequate fuels and having inadequate burning furnaces. So it's a very big health hazard in terms of pollution as well. In terms of mental health, many people are reporting that they have increased stress because they don't know how to pay their bills, or they have accumulated debt and the company is calling them on a daily basis to ask for this debt to be paid back. And this stress is translating into depressions, into anxiety problems, which are very big mental problems and have to be addressed correctly. But the problem is that most of people are not even aware that these are problems that are happening because of energy poverty, and they don't seek proper help. Also because of stigmatization, because mental problems are still stigmatized in many parts of Europe. We think that, you know, people are crazy if they ask for some psychotherapeutical support. In terms of social health, the effects are also negative because energy poverty actually limits normal functioning in everyday life, such as work, study, socializing. People that are affected by energy poverty often decrease their relations with the society. They have less intense social life, and often they fear of being stigmatized, and they actually simply withdraw and marginalize themselves from the society. So health aspects are very important also in energy poverty. And as I said before, we're trying to bring health actors into tackling energy poverty by raising awareness of the doctors, also of the frontline staff, frontline nurses that are seeing people and talking to them. Summertime energy poverty, I already actually covered quite a lot of it, so I will not repeat, but it is an issue not only in the Mediterranean part of Europe and southeast part of Europe, but actually also in parts of Europe with milder climates. It hits the most vulnerable people because they're the less likely to have access to adequate housing, or sometimes they even don't have any access to housing. And it's also a problem that is estimated to be on the rise because of climate change. Summers are becoming hotter, and also the extreme weather events related to the heat are more often and are affecting people more adverse. In terms of tackling summertime energy poverty, we need to discuss this issue when we're talking about climate adaptation plans. Currently, if you look at climate adaptation plans, they don't specify the issue of summertime energy poverty. They don't talk about it, so this is something that has to change. We have to do a lot of mitigation of heat islands. We can do this with green areas, with shading systems, preferably green shading systems. We need to thoroughly redesign our building standards, because at the moment we have building standards which are strongly focused on winter comfort, but not paying any attention to summer comfort. So it means we can insulate the building, we have new windows, but we forgot the shading. So in winter it's nice, but in summer it's a horror. So yeah, and employment of low-tech solutions such as shading, painting with white on the external surfaces, having vegetation or water roof, ensuring that there's natural ventilation. It's very important because it's easy to turn on air conditioning, but the air conditioning has several aspects that are problematic. For example, people affected by energy poverty, they cannot afford it, they cannot access it. And in terms of climate mitigation, air conditioning is causing a lot of emissions and is hence not really desired solution. The third aspect, which is negative with the air conditioning, is that it's actually causing overburdening of the electricity network in summer, and actually distributors are having difficulties with maintaining the balance of the network where all the air conditions are on. So this is why we need to look into low-tech solutions for summertime energy poverty. Quickly for the end, what you probably know is this triangle of energy poverty: the low income, high energy prices, and poor dwellings, for energy efficiency of homes. But energy poverty goes actually much wider in terms of what are the factors causing the energy poverty. I'm not going to explain this picture because it's, I think, quite inexplicable, but I wanted to just use it to illustrate that actually energy poverty is a very complex problem, and actually slowly we should start discussing energy poverty as something that goes far beyond this triangle of low income, poor energy efficiency, and high prices, because it's really going into our economic system, it's going into our social system. Our employment policies contribute to energy poverty, our housing policies, our welfare policies, our taxation also has quite some straining impacts on energy poverty. So it's like a really wider, complex system of factors that are coming and contributing to energy poverty. This is why maybe it sounds like really far-fetched that you cannot, start questioning everything. But I do think that to tackle energy poverty and the causes for energy poverty, we will have to seriously re-question our housing policies. We need to see how to ensure that energy efficiency upgrades happen to the people that need them, and also that when they happen, that people don't suffer more because, for example, they would be evicted because the renter just renovated the building and wants to have a higher rent. We also need to seriously rethink our labor policies to focus a bit more on quality and decent jobs, and not these precarious jobs that are currently very popular and modern. We also need to redirect our economic policies towards supporting well-being of people rather than just focusing on GDP growth at any cost. We need to reshape taxation systems, etc., 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 etc. I'm gonna stop here and maybe open the floor for questions, discussion, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Thanks a lot for your very insightful and rich presentation. Really, thank you. I personally have some questions actually, and will be glad to share with you. I'm looking at the chat. Somebody's writing, so while we leave the moment, we will leave space for them. In the meantime, I could make with the usual ice breaking that for the Q&A moment. Really, thanks again, because you addressed many aspects. You also presented to us other features beyond the traditional ones that are related as causes, that are seen as causes as factors of energy poverty. Therefore, this is very interesting in my opinion, and even enriches the complexity about the study of energy poverty itself as a multidimensional research issue. My main questions, while we wait from the chat some new ones, are mostly related to the empowerment projects, because I wanted to know something more, and I learned something more about it. It's very interesting, and I would start from the second question that I wrote down here. Regarding this insightful combination between energy poverty and gender, can we consider empowerment as the very first research project that addresses this dualism between energy poverty and gender, and the role played especially by women and their exposition to energy poverty more than other individuals?
I would maybe not call it the first. It's definitely one of the pioneers. But I would say there were a few studies done already prior to empowerment, looking into the relation between gender and energy poverty. But what I believe we will have is one of the rare gender disaggregated data sets. Namely, during our practical implementation, we also did a small part of research work, and we had a questionnaire about the energy poverty, where we were collecting data disaggregated by the sexes. So I believe this will be one of the very few cases of practical activities, and we are actually about to start the analysis because we're just finished now with the activities. So I hope that somewhere by the end of August, if you have the moment to drop by or to call up, I can share some results already about what are the main differences that we detected and so on. Right now, unfortunately, I cannot share much, but yeah.
Sure, very interesting, very interesting. Yeah. Thank you. First question from the chat. I'm going to read it, so I suppose you have access to the chat, but I'm going to read it so we can make it easier. It's by Matteo Mancini, which is an intern amongst the intern that helped me and Professor Giovanni Carrosio with the research, with the ongoing research activities and the questionnaires that we are also submitting here in 3. Which will be 4 in the afterwards, but for the moment there are 3 public housing buildings in the city of Trieste. And the student asks, what is the best way to get people involved in researches like these on energy poverty? Because here in Trieste we have had a few problems while trying to involve the residents without the help of local health services. So yeah, this also anticipates a second question that I would like to ask, but yes, about the involvement would be interesting to have some insights from your research activities.
Yeah, the only thing I can say is, ouch, this is a painful area. Actually, for us, it's also been very difficult. In many countries, we actually had problems with involving people because they were distrustful, they were scared. Like, for example, with the household visits, they were scared that we would say, oh, it's for free, and then in the end, we would charge them money for that. So it was very difficult to actually get to people. I think only in Albania, they didn't have any problem with the access because it was, they work with their social service provider in the local area, and the social service provider simply gave them the contacts of the most vulnerable households. But it seems that according to Albanian GDPR data protection standards, they're allowed to do this. Of course, in none of the European countries we were allowed that someone would give us data and contacts of people that could need us. So what we tried to do was we did a lot of promotion through local actors. We also worked a lot of through the health services, through the social security services, through organizations such as Red Cross or Caritas. In any case, we're looking for the local actor that already has access to people or already works with people that are affected by general poverty, and we were trying to access to people through them. What we also try to do is stimulate the word of mouth. For example, we would visit one household, we would say, okay, please tell to 3 other households to apply, and then we would give you 1 light bulb extra. And actually that started to work, but it took also quite a while before it started to work, because people, at first they were distrustful, but then in a few months they saw that everything is okay and we're not charging money. And then they started to actually tell to each other, oh, this is very nice, do call them. So I would suggest local actors and word of mouth, so asking people to tell to each other.
Okay, thank you. From second question from the chat, from Daniele Zoletto. He's also been involved in the research activities on energy poverty here in Trieste. He asks, in your opinion, is there a risk of stigmatizing the social groups to which the policy is aimed at? So stigmatization of the recipients, of the allegedly beneficiaries of policies to contrast energy poverty.
Yes, there is a high risk of that, and this is why it's one of my personal quests at the moment. I'd like to have more people affected by energy poverty involved in decision making about what policies should be designed to tackle energy poverty. One practical example, in Slovenia, we have a financial program which is offering 100% subsidy for if you renovate your home and you're affected by energy poverty. So if you receive social support, which they take as an indicator of energy poverty, you can receive a grant up to, I think, 10,000 euros to renovate your home. And they have it for individual houses and for multi-flat blocks. And the program for individual houses is working really great. People are applying for it and using it. Whereas the one for multi-flat buildings, it doesn't work at all. And our guess is that it's because people are stigmatized. They fear that all the neighbors in the building will know that they could not pay the renovation from their own pocket, and that they had to get money from the state to renovate. So they're actually not applying for the program. So it is possible that you make big stigmatization in your target group. And that's why I think it's important to involve the target group as much as possible. It is difficult. We tried once to bring a few people affected by energy poverty into a big room with decision makers where we were discussing the policies, but it was not so good because they were scared. You could really see that this is not their environment. They don't feel comfortable. They were scared to say anything. They were scared to say something wrong. So they were just quiet. So what we're trying to do now is we do interviews with people. We do one-on-one interviews. We ask them, okay, what would you propose? How would you shape this that it would be suitable for you? It's difficult. All in all, it's difficult.
Yeah, I imagine. Even because when even collective initiatives could strengthen the risk of stigmatization, because somebody is less opened up to talk about problematic aspects of their daily life in front of other people, even though these people are friends, residents in the same building, and especially in front of experts that are there not for evaluating something, but for gaining knowledge from citizens' perspective. So of course, I completely get the point of moving to one-to-one interviews, because of course people in a interview could have they have the sensation of being more opened and more protected in this relationship with the interviewer in this respect. This is something that I've even noticed in other research activities when I investigated welfare in fragile and the private neighborhoods. So, good solution in this respect. From Nicola Di Maio, from what I understood in the talking in the shoes of course, Nicola, people from certain countries like Slovenia and Italy actually are less inclined to request for help for multiple reasons that you, Lydia, explained during the presentation. I might have missed it, but not sure. Are there any information about how many people that are entitled to receive help actually do not request for it? And second, what could the government do to actually change the mindset, to change the behavior that make people refuse for help or reject any sort of help?
Yeah, I have to say thank you for all these questions. They're really fascinating questions. It shows that you really are deep into the topic. So I would say that the series of the webinars was very good for the understanding of the topic. Yeah, I cannot say that for Italy. For Slovenia, I can make a guess. The latest estimates for Slovenia says that it's about 35,000 families that are affected by energy poverty. And for example, if we know that roughly 40% of people in Slovenia live in multi-flat buildings, roughly 60% in individual housing, roughly I'm talking. So I would estimate some 15,000 people would be eligible, for example, for this program for a renovation in multi-flat buildings. But the rate, I mean, apparently last year it was only about 10 people that applied for the program. So it's about 15,000 people that are eligible, but they're not applying. In terms what the governments could do, I'm afraid I would not have many good answers. It is very difficult. I think one thing that we need to first understand is why people don't apply. And one reason is stigmatization, as I said. Another reason is that people sometimes, how to say, they have their pride. And they would want to, I mean, their pride tells them that they should make it on their own and not with support of the state or with support of neighbors and so on and so on. And many people, how to say, they cannot overcome this pride and are rather sitting in a cold home than go out and ask for support. And in a way, I mean, in a way, it's nothing wrong with it, because actually the thing is, it would be fair for people to have decent jobs with decent income, with decent access to housing, with decent access to social welfare and so on and so on. And most of the people affected by energy poverty, they don't have all that. And instead of having to take, let's say, figuratively speaking, instead of having to take the crumbs that the state offers to them to support them, to help them, they would probably like to have a decent job. And I think this is why we need to go beyond energy poverty and tackling it in this set of triangle. We have to go out of the triangle, and we have to really think, how can we provide decent jobs for the people so that they're actually able to pay for it? In Slovenia, the last few months, we see families where two people are employed, normally full-time employed, and yet with two salaries, they cannot make ends meet and they cannot cover the basic electricity and energy costs. This means that something is wrong with their job. This means that something is wrong with the payment of their job. It's simply not enough. And instead of making them beg and ask for help wherever they can get it, maybe we should make sure that they can actually have a decent life with these two salaries. So yeah, it's a very complex issue. I don't have many answers, but I'm trying to look for answers beyond what we currently look.
Sure, thank you. Back to my curiosities, still, again, they are related to empowerment project. I've noticed, especially from the case of Padua, that, let's say, the stakeholders involved are mainly private companies or NGOs, but this is I noticed it's an Horizon 2020 project. So I was wondering what is the role, if any, and to what extent is the role of departments, of universities, of scholars, rather than scholars, of universities, because I do know that there are scholars and professors involved with pivotal roles, but if any, if there is a role of departments of universities beyond the let's say the plethora of stakeholders that I saw from the map and from the info, from the online info.
Yeah. Okay. As far as I know, for Italy, they are actually working with the Energy Poverty Observatory of Italy.
Okay.
They are in constant communication. I don't remember, they told me the names of the people that they work with, but I don't unfortunately remember the names. But they are in constant communication. And also, as far as I remember, they work with several departments from different universities. But their role is mostly in advising and guiding them, because Sogesca, our Italian partner, is indeed a consultancy company, and they are very new to energy poverty, and they actually faced a lot of challenges exactly in mobilizing people, getting to people. And this is why they actually developed a lot of cooperations with the local NGOs, such as Red Cross, and there was, I don't remember, there's one environmental and social NGO that is in the locality and has communication with people. So they are trying to build this local network, and I think they're doing a really good job. But normally it takes a bit of time, and you could see that they started with energy poverty tackling in Padova, because in some other areas where they already had this network with the local actors established, things were moving much faster and much smoother. But I think they did an excellent job in Padova, and they managed to get out to quite a lot of households, and will actually still continue to do so. Maybe just to explain one thing, we don't have much strong cooperation with the research sector in empowerment, but we do work with academia and research sector in a network called Engager. It's a European network financed by COST, and it's by now bringing together, I think, over 200 experts of energy poverty from across Europe and beyond. And in my opinion, this network had a lot of important contributions because, for example, very often they were providing articles and studies and reports and policy papers, which we were using in empowerment, saying, look, this is the scientists saying that, I know, summertime energy poverty is on the rise and so on. And it was much easier for us to say, okay, this is a really big problem. It's scientifically proven that it's a problem. There is data about it and so on. So the academia and research does have a very, very strong role in researching energy poverty, because then it's easier to actually defend energy poverty actions when you talk to your decision makers, when you talk to your local authorities and so on.
Okay, interesting, thank you. One final question, at least from my side, but I suppose will be on a general scale. Back to Slovenia. I mean, you changed government a few weeks ago, we could say, a little bit more than a month ago. And according even to my knowledge and the information that you shared with me when I came to visit you in Ljubljana, I mean, energy transition, as for other, of course, the transition towards renewables in general, as for other countries, is still slow, we could say. And of course, I also know that there are the idea of having a public consulting, we call referendum in Italian, so you maybe understand what I'm talking about the construction of the second reactor of the Krško nuclear power plant. I was wondering if with this new government the situation could change, or even with the reference to this nuclear power plant, or rather your expectations are not so brilliant. Your own opinion in general. I mean, it's something very like about your first reaction after this changing of government, of wing at least.
Okay, I have to first say thank you for pointing out that we are changing the government. I'm personally really, really happy about it, because the previous government was not a very comfortable one. It was, I think, a very bad one for the country. What is changing now is that we will have a prime minister, most likely, who is actually the biggest proponent of renewables in Slovenia. He was in charge of the biggest development in terms of use of photovoltaics in Slovenia. So we really hope that he maintains this element, that he maintains the direction, and he turns more towards renewables than towards nuclear energy. The referendum is unfortunately still in the program of his party, but in the program of the party is also that they would look into development of micronuclear reactors and so on. And I mean, this is now strictly speaking my personal opinion, but when someone starts talking about micronuclear reactors, for me, I read between the lines, it's like, I'm not seriously discussing nuclear energy power. So I think we will not go into this process, but I still see it as a threat somewhere in the background. Namely, the previous government already started procedure of spatial planning for the project. So this procedure will run no matter what. And most likely during the procedure, we will also have cross-country, cross-border consultations, when Italy will also be invited to take part in the consultations. And then you will maybe be able to share your views with the state of Slovenia. Okay. But yeah, I hope it's a dead end for the project, yet it's like Sophocles' sword over our heads. It's still there. It's not completely gone.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot, Ivan, for this clarification. So finger crossed that something will change compared to the recent past. Compared to the recent past. Okay, it's almost 6:30. I think we reached a very nurtured Q&A moment and very nurtured debate. I would like to say to the audience that, some information about today's webinar are shared in the chat. There is the video about the REACH project that is shared, is pasted in the chat. The website of Focus on NGO. There is also a section in English, a particularly section in English, by the way. And even I'm going to share it just for a while, and even the website of the Eco Welfare Research Group, I already told about it, is here, and feel free to check it out. Feel free to look again what we figured out over these 4 webinars, so you can access the presentation as for this case. And you can watch again the webinar. I completely admit, and I am completely aware about the fact that watching again webinars recordings on YouTube is something quite boring. But if in general, if you need to grasp information for next activities, if you want to run into the study of energy poverty, you know that. Be aware that, be informed about the fact that the recordings are accessible from this page, and even the presentation of the past webinars that we had, the one about Brazil and Latin America held in December 2021, and the presentation about the research on community energy initiatives on renewable community energies in the context of Italy. So about the community energy map applied research. I would like to be thankful to all of you, especially to Lidija Živčič for her kind availability to find moment to stay with us despite the busy moment of EmpowerMed meetings. So really thankful. I hope that in Zadar as well is quite sunny, so you can enjoy the weather beyond the duties and the research activities. And we will keep updated. I will text to you again. I will maybe back to visit you in Ljubljana. It could be possible, even because, I will send an email about possible further steps afterwards in the next days or next week, so we can keep in touch about that. Thanks a lot, really, Lidija, for your availability, and to the students.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for all the great questions. And Lorenzo, feel welcome to share the presentation if anyone needs to have it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And while we say goodbye to Lidija, to the students, I'm also thankful to all of you. I will keep in English, but I think I could switch to Italian for a moment. Davvero grazie a tutti, grazie anche al professor Carrosio che oggi è stato con noi per poco tempo, però grazie per avermi coadiuvato nell'organizzazione di questi webinar. Sentite, ci saranno altre attività nel prossimo semestre, altre attività di questo tipo. Si parlerà più magari di transizione energetica ad ampio raggio con diversi contributi, quindi sarà un piacere per me, per noi, se continuerete a partecipare, al di là anche dei crediti F. E invece per attività, diciamo, se avete piacere, intenzione di collaborare con noi alle nostre attività di ricerca che avremo da fare nei prossimi anni, il prossimo 2 anni e mezzo in realtà. Quindi questo è dedicato soprattutto a chi è studente di laurea triennale che è ancora collegato. voi potete scrivermi e le attività di supporto alla ricerca possono essere riconosciute come attività di collaborazione, possono dar luogo anche in questo caso a dei crediti F, quindi se vorrete aiutarci e vorrete continuare, diciamo, a stare sul pezzo, come si suol dire, sul tema della transizione energetica più ad ampio raggio e vedere un po' sul campo, quindi fare anche delle attività un po' più pratiche che potrebbero essere anche utili per il vostro futuro, io avrò modo, diciamo, di notificarvi di queste informazioni, ma voi davvero sentitevi liberi di scrivermi. Il mio augurio è che qualcuno di voi magari lo faccia. So, shifting again to English, I was just saying to the students, feel free to join us again in the next further activities that will be developed. In autumn, in fall 2022, we will most likely organize other webinars like these. And I think that's it. We reached the conclusion of these 4 webinars. Studenti, riceverete l'attestato nelle prossime settimane. Voi ovviamente dovete mandarmi la domanda di richiesta credito F, indicandomi che avete partecipato a questi 4 webinar e indicandomi la data anche, d'accordo? Il modulo di domanda lo trovate alla pagina del Dipartimento, anzi facciamo così che facciamo prima. Comunque alla voce crediti F lo dovreste trovare, che è abbastanza... Eccoci qua, adesso ve lo condivido. No, questa è un'altra cosa. Adesso ve lo condivido io con voi. Vi lascio qua in chat e si chiama domanda crediti F il file e lo trovate al link che vi ho lasciato in chat. Grazie davvero a tutti per la vostra partecipazione e rimanete connessi con noi e grazie mille. Thanks again, Lidija. Really, now it's a real goodbye. We keep updated with us, and thanks a lot again for your knowledge and for sharing it with us this afternoon. Really, thank you.
Grazie mille to you.
Grazie, grazie
ciao.
davvero. Ciao, ciao, grazie. Goodbye. Ciao ragazzi, potete scollegarvi e davvero grazie a tutti, anche per le domande. Arrivederci e buona serata.